Good morning, YouTube. This is Kelsey from Kels Reads Things, also known as Librarians Recommend. I am here on this Friday morning to finally discuss with you Heir of Fire, the third book in the Throne of Glass series by Sarah J. Maas. I'm really excited to finally discuss this book with you. I actually read it within just a few days because it was so gripping and so intriguing, and I feel like the series is really starting to pick up now for me. So that's exciting because I also am a huge fan of Sarah J. Maas's A Court of Thorns and Roses series. That series is slightly more adult, and for whatever reason it just gripped me very quickly, whereas Throne of Glass has been a little more of a slow burn for me. But I will say, based on other fans and based on my own assessment, that by book 3 the series really starts to pick up and have a name of its own. So excellent job, Sarah J. Maas, and I look forward to discussing it further with you. So let's discuss. Alrighty, so at this point in Celaena's story, she has, in the first book, challenged several other assassins to become the King of Adarlan's champion. She accomplished that, and by the second book, Celaena is trying to kind of figure out where her own loyalties lie, her own missions. She's officially become the King's champion assassin. However, she is very much against the King because of some things that you find out a little bit later. So I'm going to go ahead and just say up front that this video is probably going to contain some spoilers. So if you have not read Heir of Fire or even the second book, I would not recommend listening to this video or watching this video today. So, okay, to go ahead into the spoilers, by book 2, Celaena is, we find out that she is Aelin Galathynius. She is the heir, the rightful queen of Terrasen, which was pretty much obliterated by the King of Adarlan 10 years ago when Celaena was a 8-year-old child. And she escaped and changed her identity to Celaena Sardathian to protect herself and also to become a trained assassin for Arobynn Hamel. I think that's how you pronounce his name, Arobynn. And obviously she becomes very successful with that. She becomes a successful assassin, and she more or less is just kind of trying to put her past identity and keep it in the past. She doesn't really like to accept her Fae heritage. I guess I should have mentioned that if, and obviously you probably know if you've read the series, but Aelin is Fae. And Terrasen was a magical kingdom. And 10 years ago, all magic in the continent just kind of disappeared. And all of a sudden, the King of Adarlan is just this ruthless, horrific ruler. So at this point in Celaena's story, by book 2, she is trying to more or less undermine the king. She is freeing every single person that he assigns for her to kill. And she's also trying to figure out more or less what the word keys are, which are these magical elements that kind of all three together really create extreme destruction or extreme creation. They are just these magical elements who can open portals into different worlds. And by the end of book 2, Celaena is trying to locate the other two because she's aware by now that the King of Adarlan has at least one that he's been using to strengthen up his legions and to give him power. That's how he's been able to conquer the continent of Aralia. At some point I will pronounce all of these countries and names correctly, I promise. So, finally, to talk about book 3, Celaena at this point has been sent to Wendelin, and it is her mission to murder the king and queen based on the King of Adarlan's orders. However, she of course has no intention to do so. She is also recently lost pretty much everyone she's cared about. She felt betrayed by Kaol because he withheld some information from her in regards to a threat that was on Nehemia. And as you know, if you've read the second book, Nehemia was murdered by a assassin, Grave, who was hired by Archer Finn, who's also in book 2 of the Throne of Glass series. And he was actually working with Nehemia to free the rebels of I can't say that. But the E continent, the E country, excuse me, it's a well, anyway, they're trying to free the slaves and to restore magic to the continent. That is Celaena's biggest, that's her biggest goal at this point in the story. However, she's also experiencing extreme grief. As I mentioned, she has lost pretty much everyone she's ever cared about at this point in her story. She feels extremely guilty for having kind of put her real identity in the past and not stepped up and taken over her role as queen. However, she has magic. She has the capability to create fire and potentially even ice at some point, I think it mentions. However, all magic has been stifled. It's been completely washed out, so to speak, by the King of Adarlan. He has all the magic, as we come to learn, and it's kind of her goal to eventually overthrow him. So at this point in Celaena's story, she actually runs into a fellow Fae. His name is Rowan. He is a warrior and pretty much the right-hand man to the Queen of Fae, Mauve. And Mauve is this terrifying, really demanding sort of queen that is actually related to Aelin/Celaena. She was her aunt in a really loose form somehow, and Aelin's parents actually originally kept Aelin from Queen Mauve because they were afraid of what she would try to do with Aelin's power, because Aelin is extremely powerful, even as an 8-year-old child, whenever Terrasen was taken over. And her parents were murdered, and, you know, the entire continent was down to its knees because of the King of Adarlan. That's kind of like all that we know really about Mauve, is that she wanted to get a hold of Aelin and utilize her capabilities and her power. So at this point, Celaena is in Wendelin, or in that general area. She runs into Rowan, who takes her to the Queen Mauve, and Mauve more or less tells her, you know, I will give you information about the word keys, because that's what Celaena is looking for at this point. She is trying to locate the other 2 word keys to be able to eventually restore magic and defeat the King of Adarlan. And Queen Mauve promises her she will give her any information she can about the word keys, but only if Celaena agrees to train her magical abilities. So, obviously, Celaena/Aelin agrees, and throughout the way, she stays in this fortress known as I think it's the Mist Ward? Yes, Mist Ward training. And she is pretty much training her abilities throughout this entire book. And we also run into new characters, so I'll go into that in a little bit. And I'll also go ahead and tell you right now, I gave it a rating of 5 stars. It was an amazing book. It gripped me. It was definitely the most exciting installment thus far of the Throne of Glass series, and I cannot wait to start the 4th one, Queen of Shadows. That video will likely either come in a couple of weeks or in 3 weeks, because at some point I'm going to also do a video of books that I've read thus far in 2020, and I'm going to kind of discuss what my favorite romance was, what my favorite fantasy was, and my favorite overall. Okay, so moving on back to Heir of Fire, I'm going to talk about the different characters. So in this series, the perspective changes. You go from Celaena/Aelin's experience, and not really her perspective, it's third person, but then you go to the other characters. We're introduced to some really important new ones, such as Manet Blackbeak. She is a witch who has iron teeth and like iron claws, and she's like evil or whatever, or at least she is in the beginning of the book. And she is the leader of the 13 of the Blackbeaks clan. And the Blackbeaks are a clan of the Iron Teeth, which is the witches. And basically, the witches of Aderlin have been assigned by the king to train with wyverns. And it took me a little bit to learn that wyverns are apparently dragons. I thought they were. Like 2 minutes into reading, I was like, is she describing dragons? Is that what that is? And I was like, okay, yes, it is. So basically, Manon was raised without a heart, so to speak. All witches are. They are supposed to be these evil, heartless, just vicious warriors of creatures. And she actually gets more or less adopted by this one wyvern slash dragon, Abraxos, who was originally supposed to be like a bait dragon for other dragons to train on. And he protects her from the dragon that she actually thought that she wanted. And they actually form this bond. And through this bond, you can see Manon's character throughout the story start to develop. She's starting to more or less have feelings and empathy for other creatures and other beings, including other witches. Now, the other clans are the Yellowlegs and the Blue Bloods. And she's pretty much a huge enemy of the heir to the Yellowlegs. More than anyone, they butt heads and actually try to more or less kill each other the entire novel more than anyone else. So it was really interesting seeing Manon kind of her character develop, and it's going to be very interesting when Manon and Aelin and Rowan and Kale and Dorian all meet, because Manon is on the side at this point in the story of the King of Aderlin. They are training with dragons to fight for his legion. And Abraxos, Manon's dragon, wyvern, whatever you want to call it. In this story, they're called wyverns, so I'll continue to call them wyverns, out of respect for Sarah J. Maas. And Abraxos is this dragon who actually has a heart. And in that, you kind of see, as I said before, Manon's character sort of develop because of that. We are also introduced to Aedion Ash River. Yes, Aedion Ash River. He is the cousin of Aelin. They actually grew up together in her castle, and they were the best of friends. He was like 13 when Terrasen was taken over, and when Aelin was 8. And he is actually, at this point in the story, a fierce general of the King of Aderlin's army. And he is believed to be controlled by the King of Aderlin because he has a black ring that supposedly has magic that the king uses to influence his soldiers. But you kind of learn that he has his own agenda as well. He eventually ends up working with Kaol at one point to kind of more or less not only just protect Aelin, but also to kind of eventually overthrow the king. So he was really cool to be introduced to, because you never really know. At some point with some of these characters, you don't exactly know where their loyalties lie. The story constantly is twisting and turning, and that's something that I really appreciate about Sarah J. Maas and her work. Okay. Also, one other thing I'm going to mention, a creature was introduced. They're called the Valg, and they're basically these ancient demons that can take over and influence people who have magic in their blood. And Aelin ends up fighting these throughout the story, and they're more or less nearly impossible to beat. They're considered parasites, but she ends up being able to defeat one of them, and so that just kind of pushes her story and her abilities at another level, and I'm really excited to see what she'll do in the next novel. Alrighty. So overall, I gave this a 5-star rating. It was a fantastic book. The pacing was good. It did take me about maybe 50 to 60 pages in to really get the story going, especially because one of the very first perspectives is Manon. And she's one of those characters you're just like, I don't know if I'm supposed to hate her, I don't know if I'm supposed to love her, but especially by mid book, I was definitely rooting for Manon, even though she is on the side of the King of Aderlan. I have a feeling that her loyalties are going to transform and switch to the side of good, just based on a little bit of her own character development. That was a big thing that I loved about this book, was character development, because Rowan, the Fae that I mentioned earlier that Feyre runs into, he's training her throughout this entire book, and they do not get along. He is ruthless with Selena. He pretty much calls her pathetic, a coward, all of the things that she is actually repeating in her own head, due to her own guilt, not being able to save her friend Nehemia, not being able to save her parents who were slaughtered, not being able to, take her rightful place as the Queen of Terrasen, at least at this point. So Selena is experiencing a lot of grief, but her character just, she learns how to control her powers, and she just grows so much in this book, and I can hardly wait to start the next one. However, I do have to finish I Owe You One by Sophie Kinsella. I will be discussing that book next Friday in my next video, or I may even do a midweek video to discuss that one, so that I can get my favorite books of 2020 thus far kind of out of the way. And I plan to do that once a quarter. Okay, guys. Well, once again, I give Heir a 5-star rating due to the character development, due to the story, due to the pacing. I really actually started to enjoy the different perspectives. I will say, I recommend taking notes, because there are a lot of characters that are introduced, a lot of histories, and a lot of backgrounds to keep up with. And as I mentioned in a previous video, it helps a lot to familiarize yourself with the maps that are in front of this series, just because it kind of gives you, a perspective of where is Aelin at this point in her story, where is Manon, where are all these people. Alrighty, guys, well, thank you for watching. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any suggestions for books or other content later in the future, and I look forward to seeing you very soon. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.